Okay, so the premise we're diving into today is it's a little deceptive. It sounds simple, almost like a platitude you'd see on a gym wall or something.
Right, or a coffee mug.
Exactly. But when you actually dig into the mechanics behind it, it's, well, you could argue it's one of the most important concepts in behavioral psychology.
It's certainly the one most people get wrong, or at least they apply it superficially.
The premise is this. The events of your life, the trauma, the failures, the weird conversation you had with your boss this morning, none of those things actually shape your identity.
Mm-hmm.
The meaning you assign to them is what shapes it. We're looking at the Spectrix framework today, specifically their work on reframing reality. And they lead with a core biological argument. Perception precedes behavior.
Right, and that's really where we have to start. Because most of us, we operate under the assumption that reality happens and then we react to it. Something bad happens, I feel bad.
Sure, cause and effect.
But Spectrix argues well, it's biologically impossible. You don't react to reality, you react to your nervous system's representation of reality.
So are we talking about some kind of processing delay? Or like a filter?
We're talking out of construction. Before you can even feel an emotion or take an action, your brain has to build a model of what's happening. And sure, that model is built from sensory input, and it's heavily, heavily edited by your past experiences, your beliefs, all of that.
Okay.
Spectrix calls this the internal representation. And the crucial insight here is that we spend our lives trying to change our behaviors, our procrastination, our anxiety, without ever changing the representation that produces them in the first place.
Which is why just using willpower usually fails in the long run. You're fighting the downstream effect instead of the upstream cause.
Exactly. It's like trying to change what's happening in a movie by yelling at the theater screen. You have to go to the projection room. And that brings us to the tool set they use, which it often triggers a bit of skepticism.
Yeah?
NLP.
Yeah, I wanted to hit this one early because for a lot of people, the term NLP is associated with, I don't know, aggressive sales tactics or something from the 90s.
Pickup artists, yeah.
It has a reputation for being manipulative.
And that reputation exists for a reason. I mean, the tools are effective, so of course they've been used for manipulation in the past. But in this context, in cognitive psychology, NLP is really just an operating manual for your own brain.
So not about influencing others.
No, it's about understanding the code you use to influence yourself.
Let's talk about that code aspect. The source material breaks this down into what they call submodalities. Now, this was probably the most technical part of the reading, but it was also the most illuminating for me. Can you walk us through how the nervous system actually codes a memory?
Sure. So when you think of a memory, let's say a time you failed at work, you aren't just recalling a list of facts. Your brain encodes it with specific visual and auditory qualities.
Okay, like what?
Like, is the image in your mind black and white? Or is it in vivid color? Is it a huge panoramic movie or just a small framed picture? Is the sound really loud or is it soft? Is the image right up in your face or is it, 50 feet away?
And these aren't just random aesthetic choices the brain is making. The research suggests these qualities actually determine the emotional weight of the memory.
They determine the biological response. This is that perception precedes behavior rule in action. If you visualize that work failure as a massive, bright, loud movie playing 2 inches from your nose, your amygdala, your threat detection center, it just lights up.
You feel that cortisol rush, the anxiety.
Yes. Not because you failed, but because of how you are representing the failure internally.
But if I take that exact same memory, I'm not changing the facts, not lying to myself, but I mentally, shrink the image down to the size of a postage stamp, turn it to black and white, and maybe push it far away.
The amygdala response drops. The emotional charge just dissipates. You still know you failed, the data is there, but you no longer feel the crippling shame that was attached to it. That is the essence of NLP in this context. It's not magic, it's just changing the input signal so the nervous system produces a different output.
It effectively decouples the data from the emotion.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And this leads to the central philosophy of Spectrix, which I found really important. Coherence over fixes. We live in this, life hack culture. We want the quick fix.
Right.
But Spectrix is basically arguing that a fix is useless if the whole system is incoherent.
Can you define coherence here? Because my mind just goes to being disciplined or having willpower.
Think of it this way. A fix is usually an attempt to override a signal. So if you feel fear about public speaking, a fix is forcing yourself to get on stage anyway, maybe using beta blockers or just white-knuckling it.
You get through it, but it's awful.
Right, you get through the speech, but the internal signal, this is dangerous, hasn't changed one bit.
You're essentially at war with yourself.
That is incoherence. Your conscious mind wants one thing to give the speech, and your subconscious representation wants another, which is to survive what it perceives as a threat.
So coherence would be what?
Coherence is aligning the internal representation so that public speaking gets recoded as safe or maybe even exciting. And when that happens, you don't need willpower. The behavior just happens naturally because there's no internal resistance.
Okay, so how do they get to that coherent state? The source lists this holistic stack, NLP, cognitive reframing, breath regulation. It sounds comprehensive, but how does it work diagnostically? If I come in and I'm stuck, what is Spectrix asking me to do?
Well, the diagnostic shift is from asking how to asking what.
What do you mean?
So instead of asking, how do I stop yelling at my kids, Spectrix asks, what perception is making yelling feel like the only necessary solution right now?
Wow, that's a heavy pivot. It assumes that every behavior, even a bad one, is a logical solution to a specific perception.
Precisely. The brain is a survival machine. It rarely does things for no reason. If you're yelling, it's because somewhere in your internal model, you perceive a threat or a loss of control that, to your brain, necessitates that volume. If you just try to stop yelling without addressing that core perception, you'll fail.
You have to find the distortion.
You have to find the image or the belief, the distortion that's triggering the threat response. Yes.
I do want to push back a little on this idea of distortion versus reality. A lot of people hear reframing, and they immediately think delusion, just spinning a bad situation into a good one. How does Spectrix differentiate between reframing and just toxic positivity?
That's the most common criticism, and the source material is very sharp on this. Reframing is not positive thinking. Positive thinking is often a form of bypassing. It's like painting over a rotting wall.
Right.
If you fail, positive thinking says, everything is great, I'm a winner, which is a lie, and your nervous system knows it's a lie.
So it actually creates more incoherence.
Exactly. Reframing, on the other hand, is perceptual restructuring. It acknowledges the data, but it changes the frame of reference to restore your sense of agency. So instead of I failed, which is an identity statement, right? It implies you're permanently defective.
The reframe is, that attempt refined me.
That attempt refined me. Do you feel the difference? It acknowledges the failure. The attempt didn't work, but the outcome isn't I am broken. The outcome is I now have more data.
Let's run through a few more of these from the source, because seeing the syntax change really helps land the concept. What about the feeling of rejection? They rejected me. That's a very common, very painful internal narrative.
And it's a narrative that centers the self as the problem. I was rejected because I am lacking something. The Spectrix reframe for that is, that situation revealed misalignment.
Revealed misalignment. Okay, so it shifts the focus from personal worth to, what, structural fit.
And functionally, it changes what you do next. If you believe, I was rejected, you might hide or quit. But if you believe, we are misaligned, you go look for alignment somewhere else. The data hasn't changed. You still didn't get the job or the date, but the meaning has shifted from tragedy to information.
Here's one that I think hits home for a lot of people. I'm behind. We see it with careers, buying a house. That feeling of, I am behind schedule.
The reframe for that is, I'm developing at my pace. And again, this isn't just to make you feel warm and fuzzy. The thought, I'm behind, creates panic, which shuts down the prefrontal cortex and literally makes you less capable of catching up. But I'm developing at my pace restores executive function. It allows you to actually plan.
So the argument is that the reframe is actually a more accurate, more useful description of reality than the initial emotional reaction is.
Almost always, yeah. Our emotional reactions are often based on childhood patterns or social conditioning. Reframing is an attempt to update the software to describe what is actually happening now, not what we're afraid is happening.
Okay, so we have the theory. We need to edit the film, not just scream at the screen. The source outlines a specific client-facing protocol. 3 steps: awareness, reorganization, and integration. Let's walk through the practical application here. Step 1 is awareness.
This is the hardest step for most people because we are so identified with the movie, we don't even realize we're watching it. Awareness is the act of stepping back and just observing the data. I am noticing a tightness in my chest.
I'm noticing an internal voice telling me I'm an idiot.
Exactly. I am noticing a mental image of my boss frowning.
So you're treating your own subjectivity as an object to be studied.
Yes. You have to dissociate just a little bit to see the structure. You can't change the code if you're completely lost in the program.
Then comes step 2. Reorganization. This is where we apply the NLP tweaks we talked about. Shrinking the image, changing the language, shifting I failed to I was refined.
Right, this is the editing phase. You actively intervene in the neural pattern. You play with the brightness, the volume, the framing until that emotional charge shifts. But, and this is the key takeaway if listeners remember nothing else, step 2 is useless without step 3.
Step 3, integration. The source says, insight without integration fades. I think everyone has felt this. You read a book, you have this massive realization, you feel changed.
And 3 days later, you're back to your old self.
Doing the exact same thing.
Yeah. That's because the insight happened in your neocortex, your thinking brain. But the pattern lives in your limbic system and in your body.
Yeah.
You can't just think a new identity into place.
So how does Spectrix solve for that? How do you move it from the head down into the body?
They use somatic anchoring. Once you have the reframe thought, I am being refined, you don't just say it. You have to breathe it into your nervous system. You visualize it. You sit with the new feeling until your body literally registers safety. You are training your nervous system to accept this new pathway as the default route.
It's the difference between installing new software and actually clicking save and restarting the computer.
Or the difference between reading a book on how to swing a tennis racket and actually going out and hitting 10,000 balls. The nervous system learns through repetition and state. Integration is the practice of feeling the new reality until it becomes more familiar than the old one.
Which is why breathwork is so often paired with this stuff.
Exactly. It calms the body enough to accept the new instruction.
This really explains why the source puts so much emphasis on the trap of symptom chasing. We're all obsessed with productivity hacks, 5 a.m. clubs, cold plunges, anything to force the machine to work harder. But Spectrix sees these as pretty surface level.
It sees them as inefficient. If you have an identity-level belief that says, I am unworthy of success, you can wake up at 5 a.m. every single day, but you will find a way to subconsciously self-sabotage.
You'll miss a deadline, pick a fight, burn out.
The identity always wins.
The thermostat analogy comes to mind. If your internal thermostat is set to struggle, you'll find a way to cool the room down whenever it gets too warm, whenever things get too easy or successful.
That's it. Identity-level alignment, which is the goal of this whole framework, is about resetting that thermostat. When you shift the perception from I am unworthy to I am capable and refining, you don't need to force discipline. You just naturally start doing the things a capable person does.
The phrase they used is behavior reorganizes naturally. It almost sounds too good to be true, but it aligns with the biology. If you change the input, the output has to change.
It's simple physics applied to psychology. We spend so much energy fighting our own outputs. Spectrix just says, stop fighting the output, go fix the input.
So for the listener who wants to actually test this, not just agree with it, but test it, the source offers a challenge, a simple diagnostic question to use throughout the day.
The question is, what meaning am I assigning to this?
So you're stuck in traffic, you didn't get the email reply you wanted, someone looked at you weirdly in the grocery store.
Catch yourself in that moment of reaction and ask, what meaning did I just assign to that? Did I decide the traffic meant the world is disrespectful of my time? Did I decide the lack of an email means I'm being ignored?
And then the follow-up question, is that meaning serving my growth?
And if the answer is no, you have the authority to edit. You can't move the cars in traffic, but you can change the meaning from disrespect to an unexpected pause. And just watch what happens to your blood pressure. Watch what happens to your mood for the rest of the day.
It really puts the responsibility squarely back on us. We can't blame the event anymore. We have to own the interpretation.
It's the ultimate form of responsibility, but it's also the ultimate form of liberty. You are no longer a victim of circumstance. You're the editor of your own experience.
We're going to wrap it up there. The final thought from the source material is one to chew on. You are not your past interpretation. You are the author of the next one.
And awareness alone begins the shift.
Go run the diagnostic, see what you find. Thanks for listening.